want you to consider a genuinely uncomfortable thought for a moment.
Okay.
What if the qualities you really pride yourself on the most, deep empathy, your generosity, that inherent willingness you have to always step up and help, what if those were actually the primary wide open access points for someone to completely dismantle your finances?
Or your career.
Or shatter your most important relationships?
That is the absolute core of the paradox we're diving into today.
It really is.
We're culturally conditioned, often from childhood, to believe that relentlessly striving to be the perfect, virtuous person, the real good guy, is the path to success.
To safety, even.
To safety, exactly. But historical wisdom and, frankly, the cold, hard data of modern crime suggest the opposite: pure, unguarded goodness. It isn't a shield. It's a profound structural vulnerability.
So this is where an old idea meets a very new problem.
It's Niccolò Machiavelli's brutal 16th century concept of the effectual truth, colliding head-on with the sophisticated, complex landscape of 21st century social engineering.
And this deep dive is all about identifying and internalizing what we're calling the unspoken rule of goodness. The idea that pure, detached virtue, when it lacks any strategic awareness, is basically a functional recipe for downfall. We are not here to teach you how to be cruel or cynical.
Not at all.
We're here to teach you how to be effective, because effectiveness is the ultimate defense mechanism.
And to do that, we've brought together a fascinating sort of interdisciplinary stack of sources.
Right. We're looking at modern psychological frameworks like schema therapy, hard data on social engineering cybercrime, the raw realism of the prince, and the logical blueprint of game theory.
Our mission is really to synthesize these fields that, on the surface, seem totally disparate. Renaissance politics and modern cyber risk.
They don't seem connected.
But they are. We want to construct a comprehensive strategic defense blueprint for you, the learner.
Yeah.
You need to understand not just the external mechanisms that make you a target, but also the deep psychological blueprints that make you so susceptible on the inside.
Because if you understand the blueprint,
you can rewrite the system.
Let's start with that external reality. We have to begin by appreciating the sheer scale and nature of the modern threat, because I think when most people hear cybercrime, they still picture some rogue developer writing complex code in a basement.
That's the movie version.
Exactly. But we're looking at human hacking as the dominant attack vector in the modern age.
It's a complete paradigm shift and a very sobering one. Social engineering is precisely that. It's not about finding a zero-day vulnerability in your software.
Right.
It's about exploiting a pre-existing vulnerability in human trust through targeted deception.
So the attacker doesn't even need to drop a virus.
Often, no. They can bypass even the most expensive, most sophisticated technical firewalls and security controls simply by going straight to the human on the inside.
When you look at the techniques, you realize the scammer doesn't have to know how to code a Python script at all. They just have to know how to convincingly pose as an IT support agent, or a trusted coworker, or even a government official, and make a plausible-sounding request for credentials.
Or a wire transfer.
Or a wire transfer. They exploit our virtue, our compliance, our desire to be diligent, not our operating system.
And the statistics, the stats validate this as the path of least resistance for criminals.
What are we talking about here?
Social engineering tactics are involved in a staggering 98% of all successful cyber attacks.
98%.
Just think about that figure for a moment. It is the primary, almost universal entry point. It accounts for an estimated 36% of all security incidents predicted for 2025.
So this isn't some theoretical risk. This is a daily reality.
A daily reality. Almost half of the world's population encounters some form of scam or attempted social engineering at least once a week.
That volume is just phenomenal. But what really drives the point home for me, that the human element is the weak link, is the data on the actual break-in methods.
Right, because when you examine the security incident reports, the two most common break-in methods are, they're tied. Each accounts for about 30% of incidents.
And they are.
Exploiting internet-facing applications and using stolen or misused logins.
So logins that were likely phished or tricked out of someone?
Exactly. Now contrast that 30% for stolen logins with the number for old-school malware breaches, like from clicking a bad email attachment.
What's that number?
That type of incident only accounts for about 7%.
Wow.
The math is just crystal clear. The attacker's return on investment is far higher when they invest in manipulating a person to hand over the key, the credential, than when they invest in writing complex, detectable malware.
Which also shows why the days of those, bulk, poorly written spam emails are kind of over.
They're evolving.
We're in the era of the portfolio of deception, and the attacks now are highly customized. They're specifically engineered to prey on our best impulses.
Like our diligence?
Our diligence, our professional compliance, our curiosity, or even just our sympathy.
And the evolution of phishing really mirrors this personalization. You still have the generalized mass mailing fraud, which is bulk phishing.
That's the spray and pray approach.
Exactly, shooting aimlessly, hoping 1/100% clicks. But the truly dangerous vectors are the targeted ones.
So we move into spear phishing.
Right. Spear phishing is meticulously crafted to target a specific individual or a small group within an organization for sensitive data. This requires the criminal to conduct serious, sophisticated research on their mark.
So they're doing their homework.
Weeks, sometimes months of it, harvesting details from social media, corporate websites, you name it.
And then there's the next level up from that, whaling. That perfectly encapsulates the high-stakes nature of this game.
It does. Whaling targets the highest value whales, senior management, executives, employees with C-suite access. These attacks are hyper-personalized.
How so?
Threat actors invest significant time researching the target's specific habits, their familial details, their exact role in the company.
They'll even mimic their communication style.
They'll mimic their internal communication style to make the deception flawless. This level of investment only happens when the potential payoff is enormous.
Multi-million-dollar wire transfers.
Or highly confidential corporate espionage. Exactly.
We can't neglect the mobile world in all this either. The difference in success rates between email and text is just shocking. It really highlights a critical psychological blind spot we all have.
That's smishing, or SMS phishing. And it's so successful because, fundamentally, people trust their phones more than their desktops.
It feels more personal.
It feels more personal, more immediate. Mobile phone open rates are somewhere between 8% and 14%.
Which is dramatically higher than email.
Oh, dramatically. Email open rates often hover barely above 2%.
Yeah.
People are just conditioned to respond quickly to mobile notifications, which plays right into the urgency that attackers deliberately create.
And it's not just direct communication. Attackers exploit our inherent human nature through, tangible means. Let's talk about baiting.
Right. This uses a false promise, like a free game download, a big software discount.
Or, more physically, a tempting object.
The physical baiting attack, using a seemingly lost USB drive, is a beautiful, a terrifying example of weaponized virtue.
How does that work?
They rely on the good guy employee finding it in the lobby or the parking lot and thinking, I must be helpful. I should plug this into my work computer to figure out who it belongs to so I can return it.
And boom.
And boom, the system is compromised. It exploits both curiosity and that deeply ingrained desire to simply be helpful and diligent.
Then you have the direct exploitation of our fear of loss. Scareware.
Scareware is pure psychological coercion. It uses these overwhelming pop-up ads and flashing, authoritative-looking warnings.
Your system is infected.
Your system is infected. Immediate action required. It's all designed to frighten users into purchasing or downloading malicious, totally unnecessary software.
So it preys on our innate fear of a security breach.
Or losing sensitive data. Yeah, forcing a panicky compliance rather than a reasoned technical response.
And here's where the threat model just accelerates faster than anyone predicted. AI is fundamentally changing this manipulation landscape.
It really is. The sophistication is escalating incredibly quickly, which makes detection exponentially harder.
So what's the evidence for that?
The AI-driven escalation is just undeniable. We're already seeing statistics that show AI language models are making phishing emails about 17.3% more convincing.
And crucially, it gets rid of the giveaways.
It eliminates the linguistic and formatting errors that used to be the telltale signs of a foreign or, a bulk scamming operation. Now it can create perfectly contextualized, natively fluent emails.
And the technology that enables executive impersonation, deep faking and voice cloning, that's moved from being a novelty feature in a movie to a massive real-world financial risk.
The high-impact financial losses are not projections anymore. They are already happening.
There was that one case that really stood out.
The example that shocked the entire security world was the 2024 case where a multinational energy company lost $25 million.
$25 million.
The employee was on a video conference call speaking with what appeared to be their CFO, and they just followed instructions to execute an urgent wire transfer.
But it wasn't them.
The image, the voice, the whole setting, it was entirely fabricated using deepfake technology. That employee was simply being diligent. They were being compliant with perceived executive orders.
And their virtue led to ruin.
Complete ruin.
And then you get the intensely personal attacks that weaponize the human need for connection, like honey trapping.
Honey trapping is a long-game social engineering operation.
A very long game.
The bad actor creates a fake, highly appealing, often flattering profile, and they cultivate an emotionally manipulative relationship with the victim over an extended period.
Building trust.
Deep trust. We mean deep emotional investment. Once that's established, they exploit that intimate connection to extract sensitive professional or financial information.
And sometimes use it for blackmail later.
Exactly. It's a targeted, systematic approach that weaponizes the victim's desire for love, connection, or just admiration.
The sheer volume and the relentless sophistication of these external threats, it just clearly proves that relying on a generalized, unconditional goodness is functionally insufficient for modern survival.
It is. These attacks turn our best strengths, our empathy, our cooperation, our trust, into primary vulnerabilities.
But this begs the most critical question. What makes certain people so incredibly susceptible to these tactics in the first place?
Right.
Why do we keep walking into a trap that, rationally we should see coming?
And this is our pivot point. We have to transition from the external reality of the threat landscape to the internal vulnerability.
But why?
To the why. And to understand that internal failure, we have to go back 5 centuries to find the most brutal, functional diagnosis of this very human problem.
We're talking about Machiavelli's core warning. He essentially handed us the anti-golden rule, a brutal calculus designed for survival in a very unpredictable world.
He did. Niccolò Machiavelli laid out a warning in The Prince that applies perfectly to every modern system, whether it's political, corporate, or interpersonal.
And what was that warning?
Anyone who abandons what is done for what ought to be done achieves his downfall rather than his preservation.
That's pretty blunt.
It's the core of his philosophical project. He was focused on the effectual truth of the matter, not some utopian theoretical ideal.
So he's saying that acting purely on idealism, regardless of the consequences or the reality on the ground, that's just a self-sabotaging move.
It ensures your elimination. Precisely. Machiavelli rigorously analyzed the profession of goodness trap. The leader or the individual who wishes to profess goodness at all times
will come to ruin among so many who are not good.
Exactly. This is a fundamental structural asymmetry. If you, the one player, insist on playing by purely utopian rules in a competitive, self-interested world where others are using reality-based tactics, well, you become easy prey.
You're a target.
He wrote that reliance on the will of others would cause a person's foundation to crumble at the first sign of adversity, because people are, in his words, ungrateful, fickle, simulators, and deceivers.
So he saw reality as it was, not as he wished it to be.
And that brings us squarely to the psychological blueprint that enables this kind of ruin. We need to unpack this through the lens of psychology, specifically schema therapy.
Okay, so why do some people actively set themselves up to be exploited? Why do they fulfill the exact victim profile that Machiavelli warned against centuries ago?
This directs us straight to the self-sacrifice schema, which is categorized as an early maladaptive schema, or EMS.
And what does that mean in plain English?
It describes an enduring, powerful pattern where an individual compulsively prioritizes others' needs over their own, often to the significant detriment of their own well-being, their own goals, their own identity.
And I think society often praises this pattern, right? We call it selfless or saintly.
We do. But in a Machiavellian framework, this is functionally a compliant surrender mode. It is the perfect invitation for exploitation.
So what's driving it? What's the core belief?
It's not goodness itself. It's a profound, almost paralyzing fear of shame. Specifically, the fear of being perceived as selfish or demanding or unlikable. The person with this schema often becomes the caregiver of society.
They're always taking care of everyone else.
Their massive energy output is focused entirely on managing, soothing, and caring for the people and systems in their lives. And this is driven by an unconscious, desperate need to control their environment and achieve emotional safety through performance.
That is such a critical distinction. The motivation isn't pure altruism, it's shame avoidance.
Yes.
Where does a belief system like that typically come from?
They're often deeply rooted in childhood experiences where the child's own emotional needs were frequently ignored or dismissed.
Can you give an example?
For instance, growing up too early, having to become the emotional or practical strong one for parents who are incapacitated or volatile or just emotionally preoccupied.
So they learn a lesson very early on.
They internalize the core message: be strong, be silent about your own needs, and you will be loved and safe.
So the positive behavior we see, the endless giving, the constant helping, the inability to say no, is actually a high-functioning but maladaptive coping mechanism.
Yes, designed to avoid the deep shame of needing anything themselves.
And the adult outcome of that is?
It's devastating. Chronic emotional exhaustion, deep simmering resentment that they have to suppress, and a profound loss of personal desires or goals that were never pursued.
They don't even know what they want anymore.
Exactly. They long for intimacy, to be known for who they truly are, yet they simultaneously feel deep shame whenever they try to express their authentic needs.
And this constant presentation of being independent and unneedy
is exactly what makes them a lighthouse for narcissistic or self-absorbed individuals. The dynamic is reliably one-sided.
Why?
Because the self-sacrificer will never ask for their own needs to be met, which ensures the manipulator's comfort.
This leads us right to the critical mechanism of external control. Guilt as the manipulation tool.
A classic guilt button.
Right, so how is this deep-seated need to be seen as good leveraged and weaponized against the self-sacrificer?
Manipulators leverage this vulnerability using a powerful psychological defense mechanism called projective identification.
Okay, that sounds complex. Break that down for us.
Essentially, the manipulator feels an unwanted emotion, let's say their own profound selfishness or greed, and instead of owning it, they unconsciously provoke it or project it onto the victim.
And then accuse the victim of that exact trait.
Yes. They then accuse the victim of possessing that very trait.
Give me a tangible, relatable analogy for that.
Okay. Imagine someone constantly demands your time and your resources, and you're just emotionally and financially drained.
Right.
When you finally say, I need to take just one weekend for myself, the manipulator bursts into tears and says, how could you be so selfish? After everything I've done, you abandoned me.
Oh, so they've projected their own selfishness onto you.
Precisely. And since the victim's entire identity rests on being good and unselfish, that's their core schema, they recoil instantly from the mere suggestion of being selfish.
That's the trigger. The fear of that label is so profound it just overrides all rationality.
Absolutely. To alleviate that crippling existential guilt and shame, the feeling that they're abandoning their identity as a good person, they comply immediately with the manipulator's demand.
Even if it runs directly against their best interests.
Their job, their financial security, anything. The manipulator controls the entire relationship through the victim's internal wiring.
And this compliance can sometimes look like genuine martyrdom, but it often operates through something you mentioned called pseudo-vulnerability.
That's a subtle but really critical distinction. Pseudo-vulnerability is when suffering is presented superficially or dramatically, not to genuinely seek help,
but to seek pity.
Pity, recognition, or control. We see this in the classic self-pity victim mode. It's often described as the martyr who claims they have no choice in the matter, while simultaneously highlighting the magnitude of their sacrifice.
The person who is always telling the story of how much they suffer. I have to make these sacrifices, but I have no choice.
Yes, they're subtly using that suffering to gain control, to gain admiration, and to shut down any potential criticism.
If you criticize them, you're attacking a victim.
And that profound need for validation, combined with the fear of shame, also fuels other disguised manipulation tactics. The most notable one is altruistic narcissism.
That sounds like a contradiction in terms.
And a terrifying archetype. A person who has an antagonistic and profoundly egocentric core, but hides it behind a rigid, intense facade of generosity and selflessness.
How does that work?
Their deep-seated entitlement manifests as the belief that they are uniquely empathetic and caring, and they demand that others view and treat them accordingly.
So they're using the appearance of goodness, that Machiavellian mask, not to rule a state, but to dominate a relationship or a social group.
Exactly. They use empathy to extract information or emotional commitment, only for their hostile, aggressive core to emerge once the victim is dependent.
It's the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing scenario.
It's the dark empath in action. The dark empath might have genuine empathy. They can read the room and identify insecurities. But they use that strong intuition specifically to build trust,
And then what?
and then immediately move to control people. They see the pain they cause, and it might even cause them momentary discomfort, but they proceed because they're addicted to manipulating others to keep themselves strategically safe from their own profound psychological discomfort.
The danger, as you've laid out, is that our society is just pre-wired to respond positively and helpfully to people who appear vulnerable or giving.
It is.
Which means we now have to turn to weaponized empathy, the structural application of these psychological exploits, both personal and professional.
Weaponized empathy is exactly what it sounds like. It's the strategic manipulation of someone else's deep emotional resonance, their capacity to care.
In order to do what?
To force them to act against their own calculated best interests, or to enforce silence and conformity within a group or system.
It's using the language of care and compassion to achieve a cold, hard goal of control.
Perfectly put.
Let's start with the extreme personal examples, because I think they make the rational flaw so clear.
The clearest example is emotional blackmail. In the extreme personal scenario, the manipulator essentially says, "I will suffer a final catastrophic outcome if you leave me or deny me this thing."
A very direct threat.
And the purely rational self-protective answer is, "I understand, but I need to prioritize my safety, so goodbye."
But the victim's powerful empathy prevents them from making that rational choice.
They can't. They cannot bear the unbearable weight of the projected suffering or the guilt of causing it. The term is accurate because the manipulator is consciously weaponizing the victim's goodness, their moral compass, against them.
And this form of control also manifests as conditional care.
Right, where kindness is extended only to those who conform to the manipulator's expectations. They're essentially using help as a controlling leash.
How does that play out?
Any expression of pain or dissent that the victim has, any unmet need, can be framed by the manipulator as being burdensome to the collective good or to the relationship.
So they use the guise of thinking of everyone's feelings to silence the victim who is actually suffering.
Exactly. If you dare to complain, you are the selfish one.
Let's transition this into the corporate world. We established our good intentions are hacked daily. How do our virtuous impulses translate into actual security breaches?
Our instinct for helpfulness is a prime target for social engineers. Take quid pro quo attacks.
Okay.
The attacker calls or emails, pretending to be from technical support. They might offer to fix a fictitious issue that the victim wasn't even aware of.
So they're offering help first.
Yes, and that exploits the victim's deeply ingrained reciprocity bias, that feeling that you immediately owe someone a favor.
So in return for the help,
They ask for credentials or sensitive data. It's a professional Trojan horse based on a mutual agreement of cooperation, which is actually a total setup.
and then there's the real world physical version of this, which I think is the ultimate test of professionalism versus politeness: tailgating.
Tailgating is a classic physical social engineering tactic. It involves gaining unauthorized physical access to a secure space, like a data center or an office building,
How?
by coercing or deceiving a well-meaning employee who holds the door open for them.
Simple politeness.
The attacker might be carrying a box, or pretending their access card failed, or simply appealing to that basic virtue of politeness. And the employee, driven by the desire to just be helpful, compromises the entire physical security system in seconds.
It's important to realize, though, that the targets of these hyper-sophisticated attacks are often strategic, not just random. It's not always about petty theft.
The numbers confirm this shift. Espionage-motivated attacks now make up a staggering 52% of social engineering breaches,
52%.
which demonstrates that the primary goal is often not just immediate opportunistic financial gain, which still appears in 55% of breaches, but strategic infiltration,
They're after competitive intelligence.
or achieving political leverage. The deep dive is about what we can learn from the structure of these attacks.
This brings us to the ultimate cost of choosing idealism over reality, which I think provides the structural proof of Machiavelli's argument: the whistleblower's dilemma.
Ah, yes. The whistleblower acts according to the purest moral ideal, the belief in the world that ought to be,
They report fraud, safety violations, systemic corruption.
truly believing this system will reward their integrity and fix the problem. Yet, time and time again, they are financially and reputationally destroyed by the very system they tried to save.
Which operates on the world, that is.
The world of power, self-preservation, and institutional inertia. They suffer reputational harm, career elimination, and often personal ruin.
So their moral courage is functionally rewarded with downfall.
It proves Machiavelli's warning correct about the extreme danger of maintaining pure goodness when you're surrounded by those who are not good and who have the power to eliminate you.
It highlights the structural trap. They operate under one set of rules, the rules of virtue.
While the system operates under another, the rules of power and self-preservation, the individual, by choosing to embody the highest virtue without strategic protection or anticipating the reprisal, becomes structurally unstable.
Their goodness becomes their weak point.
Exactly.
So if pure goodness is a strategy for ruin, then Machiavelli isn't telling us to just become morally empty thugs.
No, not at all.
He's telling us to become strategic, which means we need to move into the strategic defense by embracing Machiavellian realism and, well, game theory.
That reframe is absolutely necessary for modern survival. The Prince was never meant to be a manifesto for generalized evil.
What was it then?
It was a pragmatic, ruthless guide for survival and for establishing a stable, prosperous state, often during periods of civil war or intense foreign threat.
So the goal was not the salvation of the leader's personal soul.
No, Machiavelli delegates soul saving to the church. The prince's job is statecraft, which means ensuring the security, order, and stability of the city-state of Florence.
He understood that security and order are the absolute prerequisites for prosperity.
A lesson businesses and individuals must internalize.
So what lessons did he give on leadership effectiveness that challenged this reliance on pure virtue?
Well, first, there's the infamous calculus of fear versus love.
Right.
Machiavelli wrote that if you cannot be both loved and feared, which is the ideal, but it's rare, it's far better for a leader to be feared than loved.
And his reasoning was?
Because, as we already established, men are ungrateful, fickle, simulators, and deceivers. Love relies entirely on the fickle will of others and is fragile. But fear maintains control because it relies on the natural human inclination to avoid punishment.
But he also had a critical caveat about fear, didn't he? One that modern leaders often miss.
Yes, and this is crucial for the strategist. The leader must maintain the necessary fear, but they must absolutely avoid being hated.
Why?
Because hatred, unlike fear, leads inevitably to rebellion, civil unrest, and the prince's final outcome.
So how do you avoid being hated?
He advised that a prince must never seize the property or the women of his subjects.
And the translation for modern business.
Strategic ruthlessness can be necessary, but injustice and arbitrary cruelty are self-destructive.
His advice on managing appearance also seems tailor-made for modern corporate communication and political branding.
Oh, is the ultimate masterclass in strategic perception management. He said leaders must always seem to be very moral and good, honest, trustworthy, sympathetic, devout, and generous.
Even if necessity requires them to act otherwise behind closed doors.
Especially then. The public and your employees, they want to believe a leader is motivated by higher aspirations like altruism and generosity. This appearance builds the crucial political capital that allows them to make hard, unpopular decisions later.
We see that everywhere in the tech and philanthropic world.
Absolutely.
Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, claiming Facebook's mission is to make the world more open and connected,
while simultaneously expanding his influence and power over every single user and every piece of data they generate.
The appearance is altruistic connection. The reality is strategic power acquisition.
That is pure Machiavellian application. The power is exercised under the veneer of being nice and good, and this requires virtue.
Which is not traditional moral virtue.
No. It's a specific, essential quality defined as bravery, cunning, force of will, and the ability to impose one's will. This is how leaders proactively shape their own destiny, rather than passively relying on luck or fortuna.
So virtue is about strategic preparedness and active agency. It's about not allowing circumstances to dictate your survival.
Exactly. Machiavelli famously advised that a leader must master the art of war, or in modern terms, mastering politics, competitive strategy, and finance during peacetime, so that when fortune inevitably turns against them, they will be prepared to resist it. They must face challenges with a clear sense of strategic, brutal realities, understanding that the time to prepare for a flood is when the sun is shining.
This raises the question, how does this apply if you're not a 16th century prince, but a modern professional trying to navigate office politics or competitive markets? Where is the constructive application?
Well, Machiavellianism finds clear modern application though it often intersects with the darker personality traits of the dark triad.
But applied constructively.
Applied constructively, the strategic element translates into political skill, the ability to understand organizational politics, read social dynamics, and use that understanding to influence others for organizational or personal goals.
So it's results-focused.
People high in constructive Machiavellianism excel in leadership roles. They often use subtle influence to get complex projects accomplished, and their skill is very results-focused.
And what about managers who are facing those really difficult ethical decisions? The ones where the outcome is uniformly painful, like cutting budgets or instituting layoffs.
Managers often face classic dilemma situations where every available option causes damage to someone.
There's no good choice.
There's no good choice. In those situations, the Machiavellian approach is to choose the least bad action quickly, to minimize the overall negative system-wide impact.
So the focus shifts from the personal moral feeling of the action,
which is painful, to its pragmatic functional effect on the stability of the entire organization.
This also brings up the essential difference between corporate leaders and political princes. The essential role of, well, the rulebook.
Crucially, yes. Machiavelli emphasized that establishing and maintaining the rule of law is vital for long-term stability.
So the prince isn't above the law.
The prince creates a stable system where the strong cannot wield unlimited arbitrary power over the weak. Everyone is bound by predictable justice.
And for modern business leaders,
this means respecting local law, ensuring clear, well-enforced rules of good conduct internally, and advocating for non-corrupt governance in international markets. It prevents the leader from becoming a self-serving autocrat.
and ensures the company outlasts the leader.
Exactly.
So we've established that we must be strategic. But if we want a blueprint for how to interact strategically without becoming cynics who abandon our ethical compass entirely, we need to turn to the mathematical clarity of game theory.
Game theory gives us the mathematically proven path to conditional goodness. It's a strategy that maximizes individual welfare while promoting cooperation.
And we start with the foundational concept, the prisoner's dilemma.
Right. This model's a one-time, non-repeated interaction between two parties who cannot trust each other.
And in that one-time scenario, what is the rational choice?
Defection.
Yeah.
Betraying your partner for individual gain is the rational, self-interested choice.
Even though mutual cooperation would yield a better collective outcome for both of you.
Right. It perfectly models why self-interest often prevails in high-stakes, low-trust, short-term situations. If you only play the game once, trust is a liability.
But the key insight, which changes everything we know about human interaction, is the iterated prisoner's dilemma.
When the game is played over and over with the same opponent.
Establishing a history and a reputation.
Exactly. In repeated interactions, the memory of past actions allows cooperation to evolve and sustain itself. Robert Axelrod conducted these famous computer tournaments showing this.
What was the big insight?
The insight was that in the long run, greedy, purely self-interested strategies that prioritize defection, they tend to do poorly.
Really?
While more altruistic or cooperative strategies, judged purely by self-interest and long-term welfare, actually dominate the competition.
And the simple strategy that dominated Axelrod's tournament, proving to be the most robust and successful, was the beautifully simple tit-for-tat.
Or TFT. It's elegant in its simplicity, which makes it immediately readable and predictable.
So what's the strategy?
Cooperate on the very first move. Always start with trust. After that, you simply mirror the opponent's previous move.
So if they cooperate, you cooperate.
And if they betray you, you betray immediately.
What were the winning features that made TFT so robust? Why did it beat out all these complex, cynical strategies?
Axelrod identified 4 crucial virtues that ensured TFT was the most successful strategy for maximizing your outcome over the long term, especially in a competitive environment.
Okay, tell us about the first virtue.
First, it is unconditionally nice. It is never the first to betray or defect. It always extends the first gesture of cooperation.
Which opens the door for trust.
Yes, and that's critical because it avoids initiating a mutually destructive cycle of defection.
And the second, the self-protective measure.
Second, it is immediately retaliating. It punishes betrayal right away. This is its strategic backbone.
The Machiavellian part.
It's the necessary Machiavellian defense built into the cooperative framework. It instantly discourages exploitation and signals to the defector that you cannot be taken advantage of.
But it doesn't hold a grudge.
Exactly. Third, it is powerfully forgiving. It's willing to return to cooperation as soon as the opponent does. The moment the opponent reverts to cooperation, TFT reverts too.
So it breaks the cycle of mutual punishment.
And allows the relationship to recover.
And finally, it's simplicity.
Fourth, it is clear and reliable. Its simplicity and transparency make it instantly trustworthy and readable to the opponent.
So they know exactly what to expect.
Which allows for long-term, stable cooperation to flourish. Because the opponent knows precisely what behavior will trigger which response.
So TFT is essentially the conditional golden rule. It ensures you maximize your own welfare without exploiting others, but it enforces a swift, necessary justice.
It's the necessary strategy to identify and weed out the defectors in a mean, complex world.
It acts as the ultimate defense mechanism against that self-sacrificer trap we talked about.
It does. Without TFT, an individual committed to pure, unconditional cooperation would just be considered a sucker and be systematically exploited by the egoists. TFT provides the backbone of reciprocity required for survival in any competitive, self-interest-dominated culture.
TFT is tough, though. It's an eye for an eye. It's incredibly effective, but it sounds potentially too demanding for complex human relationships, where slips and miscommunications are frequent.
They are.
So is there a more humane evolution for relationships once the defectors are managed?
There is, and it is essential for achieving true long-term stability and resilience. This is where we introduce generous tit-for-tat, or GTFT.
Sometimes called the nice and forgiving strategy.
Right. This variant recognizes that systems have noise, accidental slips, or miscommunications. GTFT forgives minor slips. It only defects a certain small percentage of the time after a betrayal.
That opens the door for recovery from simple errors that could have doomed the relationship under the strictness of TFT.
Precisely. TFT's strictness can lead to a mutual, endless cycle of defection if one player defects by accident.
Because of noise in the system.
Exactly. GTFT opens the door to pull the relationship out of that punishing cycle of endless retaliation.
So this has been tested.
In experiments simulating a noisy world, the nice and forgiving strategy came out on top, specifically because it could withstand minor unintentional defects and revert back to cooperation.
As long as the opponent was mostly cooperative?
As long as their cooperation rate stayed above a certain threshold, typically about 80%.
This demonstrates the evolutionary path, the ideal path forward for an individual seeking stability.
Right. TFT is the catalyst strategy. It is necessary to establish initial security, especially when you are surrounded by defectors or entering a new low-trust environment.
It sets the boundaries.
It sets the boundaries. But once cooperation becomes the established norm, the system evolves toward more generous, forgiving strategies like GTFT.
So this is the bilingual path for the modern strategist.
You must be fluent in the language of strict reciprocity, of TFT, for protection. But you must be ready to shift to earn generosity, GTFT, once trust and stability are genuinely established.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? The unspoken rule is devastatingly simple. The world judges you on effectiveness and reality, not on your intention or your idealism.
Your kindness and your virtues are only strengths if they are backed by the strategic realism necessary to defend them.
The strategic person understands they have to move past that self-sacrifice schema.
And embrace the healthy adult mode. Setting necessary non-negotiable boundaries is not selfish. It is the prerequisite for maintaining the emotional, financial, and strategic stability required for long-term health.
The challenge for you is living that bilingual path.
Speaking the language of goodness and cooperation while never ever forgetting the effective truth of how the world truly operates.
So here's the final provocative thought for you to explore after this deep dive. If a strategy of conditional cooperation like tit for tat is the proven mechanism for long-term success, what current relationship in your life, whether it's personal or professional, are you treating like a quick, one-off, low-trust prisoner's dilemma when you should be investing in the long-term, iterative game of earned reciprocity?
That's been a question.
Where can you apply the initial cooperation of TFT to build trust, knowing you have the backbone to defend yourself?
You have to apply the strategy today. And a strategic person understands that you can't leave without leaving a mark.
So if this deep dive helped you realize your inherent goodness needs a backbone of strategy, let us know by showing your reciprocity.
Prove you've understood the power of conditional cooperation by hitting that like button right now. It's a small, clear signal of cooperation that keeps this whole system running.
And if you want to train your virtue and ensure you are always strategically prepared for the next wave of adversity, subscribe to Total Life Mastery and ring the bell.
That ensures you never miss the blueprint for success.
Now go forth and be effective.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.